I absolutely love bringing up interfaces for the first time on Cisco devices, whether it's the physical interface, a layer 3 interface on a router, or it's a switched virtual interface like interface VLAN 1 on a multi-layer switch. It's fantastic to bring up the interface, put on the IP address, and then verify the basic connectivity on that local network by doing a ping. And that's exactly the opportunity that you and I have in this lab as we bring up the initial base IP addresses on our routers and switches and then verify connectivity. So my friend, here's our game plan. On this topology, we are going to configure the interface VLAN 1. That's a logical layer 3 interface on our switches. We're going to configure interface VLAN 1 on access 1, giving it this IP address, 192.168.1.4, with a mask of 255.255.255.0. And then we'll configure interface VLAN 1 on core 1 using this IP address, and on core 2 using its interface VLAN 1 with this IP address, and then finishing off that 192.168.1 network right here. We're also going to configure this interface on router 1, its gig 00 interface with this IP address of 192.168.1.1 with a mask of 255.255.255.0. But wait, there's more! I'd also like us to configure just one interface on each of the remote routers. One in Nevada, one in Florida. Let's take a look at those interfaces and those IP addresses as well. So here in Nevada, on router 2, we're going to configure this interface 1/0 with the IP address listed here in this row. And for router 3 in Florida, we'll configure its gigabit 1/0 interface with this IP address listed in this last row here. And I would recommend either printing off or having this visible while you're doing the configuration in the labs. So that way we can verify we're putting on the correct IP address on each of those respective interfaces. Now once it's done, from router 1 or from core 1 or core 2 or the access layer switch, they should all be able to ping each other because they're all in the same exact network. So as far as a test, we should have full reachability with pinging at least between these 4 devices in Arizona. So here, my friend, is our opportunity. If you're already comfortable with the steps of going into configuration mode with config-t and then going into interface configuration mode by typing interface space and either VLAN 1 or the interface on the router, whatever it is, and then putting in the IP address, fantastic. Go ahead and pause me right now. Take a look at the table, implement the IP addresses across the topology as we've talked about in the table, and then when you're done, click on resume, and then we can do the walkthrough together just to verify our work. Now, here's the gotcha. It's going to happen at least once, probably to most people, sometimes twice. And that is on Cisco routers, those interfaces are, what's the word I'm looking for? Down by default. So unless we do a no shutdown, to bring that interface up, it's not going to be too effective. When in doubt, when you go into that interface config, do the no shutdown, put on the IP address, and then do the testing once we have all the IP addresses configured. So have some fun in the lab. I'll put the topology and the table back up for a moment with a brief pause, and then we can continue with the walkthrough. All right, let's start on the access layer switch since we're right there. And just for grins, it's always a great idea to see what we're working with before we start. So let's do a show IP interface brief just to verify that there's no current IP addresses or VLAN interfaces assigned. Okay, so we're good to go. We'll go into configuration mode. Interface VLAN 1, press enter. For good measure, no shutdown. So whether or not it's shut down by default or isn't, doesn't matter because we're going to bring it up. And then we'll specify IP address. And looking at my table, the IP address for that interface is 192.168.1.4 with a mask of 255.255.255.0. And we'll press enter. Oh no! Oh no! The reason I'm saying oh no is because I got a console message. And on this device, logging synchronous is not on because it put my cursor and all my typing at the very end. Do you know what? This is a great opportunity. This is very real world. If you want to correct this problem, which is meaning logging synchronous is not on the console ports, go ahead and just go to line console 0, type in logging synchronous, and now it'll be there. So wherever you find a router, if it doesn't have that already, go ahead and add it. That'd be fine. All right, so I'm going to do a Control Z and exit out. And let's do a show IP interface brief. Press enter. And there we go. We've got the logical layer 3 interface VLAN 1 with this IP address 192.168.1.4. Fantastic. Let's go to our next device. All right, so here on Core 1, let's do a show IP interface brief and verify. Okay, so we've got the VLAN 1 logical layer 3 interface, but it's currently down and no IP address assigned. Great. So let's go into configuration mode, interface VLAN 1, and we'll give the IP address with the IP address command of 192.168.1. And this is going to be .2 based on our plan. And we'll put in the mask. And fabulous. And then we'll also make sure it's up by doing a no shutdown, and we'll bring it up. And boy, it looks like all these devices don't have logging synchronous online console 0. So because when I'm working on a device like this and I really want it to repaint that line for me, I might take the extra step, if it's not already done, to go into line console 0 and then do logging synchronous, just so that it gives me that benefit. All right. So we'll get out of configuration mode to a show IP interface brief. All right, and then there's our interface VLAN 1. It's got the IP address of 192.168.1.2, and that interface is up. That is great. So we have a few to go. In fact, let's take a look at our drawing. We've got Core 2 to go, and its interface VLAN 1, and then also router 1, gig 00, as specified here, and router 2 and router 3 with their gig 1/0s each, respectively, and their IP addresses. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go ahead and put some music on in the background, and I'm going to do this in speed mode because it's going to be the exact same commands on all of them. Global config, interface config, IP address, no shutdown, get out of configuration mode, and then a quick show command just to verify that the IP address I intended to put there actually is associated with that interface. All right, so now with all those initial addresses configured, we should be able to, from router 1 or core 1 or core 2 or access layer switch 1, we should be able to ping any of these devices right here. So we could go right here to R1 and just try to ping core 1, core 2, and the access layer switch, and that would verify our connectivity, at least here up in Arizona. So let's do that ping test next. So we'll go over to router 1, and here on router 1, let's go and do a ping to 192.168.1.2. That is the IP address of the interface VLAN 1 on core 1. That looks great. Fantastic. And let's hit the up arrow key and let's go to .3, which is the IP address on the interface VLAN 1 of core 2. And that looks great. Super. And let's also ping the access layer switch at .4. Using the up arrow key, going to swap out the last digit there. Go to .4, and survey says that had me worried for a moment. That looks good too. So now the ARP caches are all populated, we shouldn't have any drop pings whatsoever. So in this hands-on lab, we've had the opportunity to configure IP addresses many times on the multi-layer switches, on the access layer switch, on the routers. And one of the key things that, in fact, as I did the demo, I forgot on one of the interfaces to bring it up. And that's why it's always a good idea after we make a change and we do a show IP interface brief, if it still shows administratively down, we don't want to go back in and bring it up. So setting up the IP address correctly and bringing the interface up so it's not administratively down are two critical pieces to making sure that it worked. So thanks for joining me in this lab, and I'll see you in the very next video. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.